Hello and welcome to Atheist Torah Study. My name is Emma Lugo and I'm your host. So today we're going to be talking about Parsha Vayera. That's Genesis chapter 18 to 22. Again, for those who have never joined me before for this, this is Atheist Torah Study. I am an atheist, and I am following the Jewish cycle of studying the Torah, which is where you read one parsha a week. And a parsha is basically like a section of Torah. It's not really a chapter, it's just kind of a section that's been organized kind of thematically. But it follows in sequential order in the Torah. And again, the Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, or the Tanakh, the first 5 books of the Tanakh. And in Judaism, we unroll the Torah. It's actually on a scroll, and it's written in Hebrew. And we unroll the Torah on Saturdays and read it at a synagogue. So that's kind of what. But the Jews we also study Torah. And so there's a long, long tradition in Judaism of studying Torah and trying to wrestle with its meaning. So that's what the Torah is. I'm an atheist, so I don't believe that there's a God. I believe that we're animals and that we evolved according to the laws of evolution, and that the world is fundamentally meaningless. But for us as humans, I'm kind of an existentialist. So I think that for us as human beings, we still have to create meaning anyways. We're kind of meaning-making machines. I really believe that. So we're going to read the Torah. It's a really good book. Some people think it's a terrible book. And there are a lot of parts of it that are really terrible, too. That's true. It's really old literature. It's not the oldest literature on earth, but it has connections going way back. In addition to the part of the Torah that was written somewhere between 576 BCE, which was my understanding of when the Torah was written, until most recently I've come across really interesting scholarship that suggested that really the Torah was written in like the 3rd century BCE. So it's all very interesting. It was definitely written, compiled sometime around then. There's definitely historical evidence that there was a Judean culture, the Judean kingdom that went back way, way past that. But the Torah is now the essence of Jewish practice and Jewish, the Jewish culture is really focused on the Torah. And anyway, so I think it's worth a read. I actually read it every week. Even though I'm an atheist, I still read the Torah and talk about it, because one of the things that I've learned in all of my years of studying the Torah is that for me, actually, as an atheist, being able to study a religious text and really wrestle with its meaning makes me a better atheist, because it helps me understand like people who think about religion and why they think about it. And it helps me parse out like the things that I think are religion and supernatural from things that are practical, and sort of trying to understand. I also love it because it's ancient history. I love the ancient history in the Torah. There's so many connections with so much going back into Western prehistory. So it's pretty cool. I really enjoy it. Anyways, so today we're going to be reading Vayera. And Vayera is, it's the story of Abraham and Sarah, and when Sarah gets pregnant. So right now we're kind of in the classic heart of where I would consider to be space that really belongs more to the goddess worshiping culture that's sort of preserved in the Torah, even though the Torah is mostly a pretty patriarchal document. I mean, it comes across as patriarchal. Although, when you kind of look beneath the text and massage it a little bit, you find a lot of stuff in there that's really not patriarchal at all. But, anyways, this part of the text of the Torah, I feel like, is really focused on women, women's laughter, women's consciousness. According to my understanding, Sarah was kind of a cultural embodiment of the temple priestess. So she was like someone who, was connected with the goddess worshiping cultures that were very prominent and present all around the Levant at the time. There were goddess worshiping cultures, and Sarah was an embodiment of that tradition. And, but she's been taken out of that particular role, at least as I understand it. And she's been placed into this role where she's like married her brother, Abraham, who's, her brother. And so there's a brother-sister relationship here. And we're sort of telling her complex story. But, she's obviously, she spends a lot of time associating with other women. She's not your typical woman in ancient text. So it's an interesting read, and we'll talk about Sarah, we'll talk about Abraham, but mostly I'll talk about atheism and like how I look at this as an atheist and where this fits into kind of my understanding of the world. So first I'm going to do the blessing for Torah study, which I do every week. It's a blessing that that Jews say in Hebrew to kind of bless our study. And for me, I just use it as a chance to say a little Hebrew without really thinking about what it means. But it's nice. It kind of it's just a little ritual that you use to kind of get your mind prepared for looking at a text. Anyway, sorry, it goes like this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'asok v'rei Torah. It basically means, we're blessing the Torah study. So anyways, here, so there's two parts that we're going to go over today. The first part is the part that is actually the beginning of the Parsha. Again, it's Genesis chapter 18. It's called Vayera. And then the second part we're going to do is actually the reading that's part of this triennial cycle. And the triennial cycle is that's just basically when Jews read different parts of the Torah. Not all Jews follow the triennial cycle, but at least some schools of Judaism do in the U.S. And basically what they do is they break up the Parsha into three parts, and they read one part of the Parsha every year, because it really does take a long time to read the Parsha, especially if you're commenting on it all the way along, or if you're looking at other commentary. So I'll read the first part, and then I'll get to the third part, which is actually where we're supposed to be for this part of the year. And if you're looking for something to go along with on this, in terms of resources, I always use Sefaria, SEFARIA.org. It's a website. It's a great collection of Jewish literature, Jewish texts. It's the best. So I would just recommend Safari. I think that's pretty much got everything you need right there. All right, here goes Vayera. Vayera, and he appeared. So who appeared? We'll find out. Vayera, he appeared. Vayera, chapter 18 of Bereshit, Genesis, verse 1. Yud Hey Vav Hey, which is so Yud Hey Vav Hey. Great, so we get a chance to start off right away with an atheist religious talk. So the text starts with the Hebrew letters Yid, Hey, Vav, Hey. Um, as Jews, we say that means Hashem. If you're just in study, if you're in a synagogue and you're praying, for the Yid, Hey, Vav, Hey, we use the word Adonai. So those are both words that are supposed to refer to the unspeakable name of God. So right away we're already knee deep in it. This is a great place to start. Hopefully we'll get past one word today because I'm really, really bad at even getting a few verses in. But we're going to start with this one because it's the first time this year we've come across this. So they start with Yud Hey Vav Hey, and that's supposed to be the name of God. That's the name that only the high priest, I think, knew how to say the name. And he just said it once a year when he went into the temple behind the screen. I'll explain what that is later. Anyways, this name, there's several names of God in the Torah, including El Shaddai. What was the one I heard today when I was reading Hi Sarah? I can't remember. Anyways, there's a lot of names of God. But this is supposed to be the name. So, and it's supposed to be like the way that I understand it in Judaism is like when we get to Moses, we'll talk about this. But in Judaism, well, first of all, I mean, I don't even know what God is. So this is like the unnameable thing of something that I don't even know what it is, honestly. But it's like I mean, the first thing you have to ask yourself, if you're not religious and you come across stuff like this, is you think, what is the deal? Like, how did this get to this point? How did human culture get to the point where there was this unnameable name of a god? Like, what does it mean? So, I mean, to look at it, you kind of have to go backwards and reverse engineer human thought, which isn't really possible. I don't really think you can understand what these people are thinking. I mean, my best guess is that what's going on is that people are, well, honestly, I don't really know. I don't know this. I don't understand why people suddenly became monotheists. Like, for a long time, there was like polytheism. There was kind of like nature worshiping cultures. There were goddess worshiping cultures. There were patriarchal cultures. There was the worship of the dead. I mean, there were all these different tendencies in ancient culture. And from those tendencies, there were a few monotheistic traditions that kind of sprung up. One of them was in Egypt for a while. There was an Egyptian pharaoh who decided that there was only one God and that everybody had to worship that one God. And then you've got Judaism here. In Judaism, they say there's just one God. And they say this is his name. Like I said, in Judaism, we don't really have a word for it. We use the word Hashem instead of a name. Christians use Yud Hey Vav Hey. They take that and they say the word Yahweh or Jehovah. Some Christians do that too. So it's a name. But it's like, what does it mean? What does it mean? There's like this name. Like earlier in the Torah, there's this God. And it's like the God is sort of like, kind of a more knowable God. Like God the creator. But here is God who's like, is different. I mean, but I think in a way it's almost easier just to look at this and understand it the way that people understand fairy tales. I mean, because the story here is that God appeared to Abraham, and I haven't even read any of it yet, but the idea is that God appeared to Abraham. So it's like, but I just got stuck on the very first word, because here it's like they're saying Yud Hey Vav Hey, so they're saying the unnameable God. And the reason I bring this up is because it goes right away, it goes straight into Jewish understandings of what God is. Like, so in Jewish tradition and in monotheistic tradition generally, there's suddenly this God that's unknowable, something that's beyond all knowledge, like the creator of the universe, something that can read your thoughts, something that is deeply involved in issues of morality and ethics. And I don't know, something that kind of has a will of its own, too. I mean, this God definitely has a human will, but I mean, apparently, my guess is that what was going on is like in ancient cultures, people had, I mean, I don't know, I can't really understand. I have to be honest, I don't really understand. I don't know what God is. I mean, I know what I was taught was God, but I don't know what that means because it doesn't really mean anything. I mean, as an atheist, I can't really connect with it because it doesn't mean anything. I mean, I know that for me as a child growing up, the idea was that I was taught that I had this soul, a soul. Like this thing that's like, in a way I mean, it's like, it's not really Jewish, it's really more Greek, but it's like, there's this idea that there's something besides my body. I have this soul, you can't measure your soul. It's like, it's, but I mean, I don't know what people thought a soul was. I mean, I think what people thought a soul was I think they thought it was their brain, basically. Like their brain, because they could see themselves and recognize themselves as distinct and as individuals, even though in the last episode of this, I deconstructed the idea of what it means to be an individual. But here, like these people, they have this idea of a soul, and it's like, I think it's kind of their brain plus memory. It's like people have, and also self awareness. So it's like you have self awareness, you have your brain, you have memory. Oh, and fear too. Fear is actually a big part, I think, of what a soul is, because all of those things together create this sense of something that you really want to preserve. You want to preserve your identity. You want to preserve your brain. You want to preserve your memories. You want to preserve, whatever that, and then some of it's also, I guess, reproduction. You know, I mean, when you reproduce and then you have these little kids and they look like you and they think like you because you've indoctrinated them to be like you, then you also feel a connection to the future. I mean, I think it's all those things. I think that's what a soul is. I mean, but people have an idea that a soul is something separate from your body and that it's this thing that continues on past your body. Now, that's Greek. That's not necessarily Jewish, although later on in Judaism it does kind of become a thing in the Middle Ages. But here it's not specifically Jewish. But why am I talking about souls? The reason I'm talking about souls is because the idea of a soul is very much connected to the idea of a God. So I think that maybe what the God is here is the God is the collective consciousness of like all the brains, like all the people who are thinking of themselves and their identity and seeing other people and thinking of those people and their identity, like that conversation that happens between all those people that kind of makes human society. I think that maybe that's what people think God is. Like, God is like an individual expression of the complex part of human society. That's what I think God is. I mean, I think that God is like, I don't know, it's like, it's definitely imaginary. So it's something in people's imagination. In the same way, a soul is something in your imagination. But like the unnameable God, who's like, the idea is that there's like, it's also kind of a king. So it's like an imaginary king. You know, it's like, I mean, when you look back at human history and when you look at the advent of civilization, one of the first things that the Mesopotamian city states did was they kind of created a priestly class. And there had never been, there's not at least a lot of evidence that before the rise of the first city states that there was a priestly class. I mean, there may have been one anyways. This might be something that goes way back, like maybe even before history. But, you know, there's a priestly class, and I guess the priestly class was like the religious people. I don't know. I mean, they got some privileges. There was a priestly class. So, how does that relate to the idea of God, though? I mean, what is a God? It's like, also, you know, the other thing, I think the really obvious thing is that God is just a word. It's like, in a way, God is almost like the ultimate fetish or the ultimate icon because it's a word. And as long as you say that that word is this supernatural thing that's like, you know, beyond the body and beyond anything, but it's a word, then you can just take that word around with you everywhere you go. And you can say, oh, God, you know, there's this word, God. And it's like, it's a word. So I don't know. I don't know what God is. Maybe it's also the power of the human imagination. You know, it's a fertile concept. It really is. It's a very fertile concept. But I don't really know what it means. Anyways, okay, so I'm heading toward the record for the least number of words to actually be read in an atheist Torah study, and I do not want that record. So I'm going to keep on going. So again, we're here at chapter 18, verse 1 of Vayera. And so far I've gotten one word done. Hashem. Hashem, God, appeared to him, Abraham, by the terebinths of Mamre. What's the terebinths of Mamre? Let's see. Okay, so I thought I knew what it was, but I just want to make sure. So the terebinths of Mamre were an oak tree in Mamre, and which today is known as Hebron, which I think Hebron is actually this part of the Middle East that Israel's bombing right now. But I'm not absolutely sure about that. Anyways, so Abraham is hanging out by an oak tree. He's sitting under an oak tree, and it's, you know, right away this story has a religious meaning. You know, he's not just sitting under an oak tree because that's just convenient. That's like where the writer found him. The writer's putting him under a tree because it means something. Anyways, so he's by it. So he's by the tree, the oak tree of Mamre, and he's sitting at the entrance to his tent as the day grew hot. So that's a nice line. It's like, okay, so that's one thing that we'll find as we're going through this part of the Torah, and it's harder to do atheist Torah study with this part of the Torah because it's a little bit more descriptive. Although, as we'll see here, we go right away into crazy land. Well, not crazy. I'm sorry, I take that back. We go right away into fairy tale land. So even though this is very descriptive, it's not like other parts of the Torah where there's a lot of parts of the Torah where it's just like God just is saying something like, God says to stone your drunken son if he becomes too drunkard and, obnoxious, then you're to stone him. And there's a lot of parts of the Torah that are just like that, or parts of the Torah where God just like, just decides that he's going to smote everything in sight and he smotes everything. There's a lot of parts like that in the Torah, but this is not like that. This is actually a story. It's telling a story. And it's a long, complicated story. The story really starts with Abraham. And it goes all the way through until the end of Genesis now. It's a big, long story. It's like a novel. It's like, this is like Absalom. This is like William Faulkner style writing here. This is a story. It's a family. It's like The Godfather. Oh boy. Anyways, it's a big, long family story. It's telling a story of a family. So, Hashem appeared to him by the oak tree. He was sitting at the entrance of his tent as the day grew hot. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say about this, there's not a lot of this in the Torah. The Torah is not necessarily the most descriptive book. This is at a time when there still weren't any really formal rules about how you do writing. So, as this person is telling the story, but they put in details, which you don't find in much of the Torah. And one of the details is that it's hot. So it really gives you a sense right away, like Abraham is someplace and it's hot. Speaking of hot, it's weird. We just talked about it being hot and now I'm getting hot. So I'm going to take off my sweater. Anyways, so looking up, okay, verse 2. I'll at least get to 2 verses today. Verse 2. Looking up, he saw 3 figures standing near him. 3 figures, what does that mean? Is it, who's the 3 figures? We'll find out in just a minute. Looking up, he saw 3 figures. Well, there's already commentary on this. Let's look at the commentary. Well, anyways, I'll just give it away. I'm not going to even bother to read the commentary. So the commentary is that there's 3 angels. These are angels. And it's like, so now you ask yourself, what is an angel? I don't know. I don't know what a god is. I don't know what an angel is either. I mean, when I think of angels, I think of stuff I've seen from paintings from the Romanesque period. It's like, a girl in a, what do they call those things that the Romans used to wear? Like a toga? Like a girl in a toga, with wings, and she's flying around. To me, I think that's what an angel is. But I don't know what an angel is, I mean, it just says there's 3 angels, three figures. I mean, who knows? Who knows? Maybe he's hallucinating. He's out in the desert. Maybe he's hallucinating. But anyways, he looks up. He sees 3 angels standing near him. Perceiving this, he ran from the entrance of the tent to greet them, bowing to the ground. So this is the story here is that Moses is humble. It's supposed to be the Moses is humble. But, it's a really old text, so you can't really read it the same way we read a modern text. I mean, they say a lot of the same things over and over again. This keeps on coming up all the time when they're describing Moses. And what the redactors of this part of the Torah are trying to do is, according to their understanding of Bedouin culture, of shepherds, he's trying to just tell a story about his character. He's trying to show that he's humble, he's not pretentious, and he's hospitable. So that's nice. That's nice. Anyways, but back to the angels, it's like there's these things and they're angels. There's not a lot of places in the Torah where angels show up, but there's a few. I mean, to me, as an atheist, I think an angel is sort of like it's like a plot device. Like you have this plot you've written, and you want to go somewhere with it, and so you create an imaginary being, which in this, it's basically like the same thing as creating God. It's like you create this imaginary being, and then you think that if you've made that, then you can sort of tell the story with this imaginary being. And I think that's what the angels are. They're kind of there to hold the plot and to kind of move the story forward. I mean, they're not really, I mean, they're not anything. In spite of every country music song you've ever heard about angels, like, there's no angels. I don't even know what an angel is. I don't know what good an angel would do. Is an angel like a genie? Is it like, you rub a lamp, a genie pops out, you make 3 wishes? Is that what you do when you see an angel? Or I think you're supposed to pray to an angel. I'm not really sure. But it's like, what is an angel? Like, why is there angels? I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what it is. But we'll go on. So 3 figures, 3 angels. He said, "My lords, if it please you, do not go on past your servant." Now, see, so here they're kind of showing, maybe Abraham's kind of a dummy. Like he doesn't realize they're angels. So then you think, oh, he calls them my lords. And, he wants to offer them water to bathe in and to relax under a tree. So now, you're starting to change your mind. It's like, oh, maybe he doesn't know these are angels. Maybe he just thinks these are ordinary guys. They're just traveling through. He's trying to be hospitable. So then he says, "And let me fetch a morsel of bread that you may refresh yourselves. Then go on, seeing that you have come your servant's way." And the angels say, "Do as you have said." So, scintillating conversation. Anyway, so then Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah. Again, remember, this is like, to me, Sarah's like a priestess of a goddess worshipping culture. And here she's sort of being repurposed. So these are obviously just characters in a story. I mean, they're not real. There's no history behind them. They're just this story. In a way, they're kind of placeholders for anybody who has a family and has a patriarch of their family, has a matriarch. These people are kind of placeholders for those, It's like, if you can imagine your own family lineage, if you happen to have that and you want to think back, to great-grandma, great-grandpa, or even further back, I think that's what this is. Anyways, it's kind of telling the story of like everyone's Grandpa Abraham. So Abraham went to the tent, Sarah, and said, "Quick, 3 seahs of choice flour, knead some and make cakes." So he's basically telling Sarah to, do some cooking. Get ready to do the cooking, woman. That's what I'm telling you to do. Make some cakes. Then Abraham ran to the herd. So he's a herder and he's got a big flock. And then he takes out a calf, which is gross, a little baby, and he gives it to some kid and tells the kid to go and slaughter the calf. Kind of like he's about to do to his own son. Anyways, so he tells the kid to slaughter the calf, and then he took curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. So obviously Abraham is not kosher. I never caught that before. Abraham's not kosher because if he was kosher, he would not have the curds and milk along with the meat. You wouldn't do that if you're kosher. So, Abraham's not a real Jew yet. He's he's going to be the father of all the Jews, but he's not quite there yet because he's not really kosher. Anyways, but I mean, since he doesn't have a Torah to read, he doesn't have a set of instructions he has to follow. So that's Abraham right now. And then, so he gave the angels curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared. And he waited on them under the under the tree, the oak tree. Then the angel said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" And he replied, "There in the tent." Again, this is dramaturg. Then one of the angels said, "I will return to you next year, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him. So here's the religious part. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah had stopped knowing the ways of a woman. Okay, let's go back just a little bit here. Okay, so we're past the kosher part. And then the angel, right? So one angel, just one angel speaks. So it's, I don't know, is this like the chorus, It's like the Greek chorus, it was always like three people. And they represented different parts of the, like, pathos. Maybe that's what this is. So one of the angels speaks. And one of the angels says, "Where's your wife Sarah?" And then the angel says, "I will return to you next year, and Sarah will have a son." So, the angel is telling Sarah and everybody who lives in the house that she's going to get pregnant and that this is a miracle. So, here's another atheist thing. So it's like, from my perspective as an atheist, miracles don't happen. I know people believe in miracles. I know that it's a thing and people think it's real. So then you have to kind of go into the science of understanding, like, how do people believe in miracles? And you also have to ask yourself, if you're going to talk about miracles, how do people believe in magic? Because that's really what this is. It's like the God who starts the story off is not like a magical God. The God who starts the story off this week is just a God. It's like kind of an abstraction. But now, this part, if there's a God in this part, it's a very real part here. Because here we're talking about pregnancy and we're talking about magic. So this idea that somehow you can magically be told something's going to happen. It's like predicting the future, making a prophecy, and then doing something that is considered miraculous. It's like, now it is true there are women who have had children very late in life. I mean, usually through in vitro fertilization as surrogates, but it does happen. I mean, there's an Indian woman who had a baby at 65, which is 10 years older than me. So that's pretty impressive. And it was, I think she was like carrying the baby for one of her kids, maybe one of her daughters who couldn't have a baby. So she offered to have the baby for her daughter. So, this is a thing. I mean, you can get pregnant when you're old. Like, I'm transgender. Transgender men can get pregnant. That's amazing. Somebody who looks like a guy, who has facial hair and, a lowered voice and maybe even hairy arms can have a baby. So, a 65-year-old woman can have a baby. So I'm not sure how old Sarah is here, but I think she's supposed to be in her 90s. But anyways, so it's like, it's a miracle. I mean, I'm not sure how much of a miracle it is. I mean, when you really think about it, it's like, who wants to have a kid when they're 90 and then you have to take care of them and raise them? It's like, it kind of reminds me of, what it reminds me of? It reminds me of that story of the last Confederate widow. And for a while in the South, there was this weird tradition of like around the 1920s, this happened. So there were women who were in their teens, they weren't very old, and they were marrying Confederate soldiers, like Southern men who had fought in the Civil War and who were now in their 90s. And they were marrying these women who were in their teens. And so that they could continue on, perpetuate the race of racist white people, and so these 90-year-old men were marrying these women, in their teens, because there's some weird fixation we have on all of this stuff. We have so many bizarre fixations on reproduction. I just can't even begin to tell you. I mean, as a transgender person, I look at reproduction and it's like, I just think the way that people think about reproduction is just so bizarre. And a lot of this part of the Torah is about reproducing. It's basically about, Abraham and Sarah and all their lineage and everybody who's descended from them. And, so much of this part of the Torah, it's about religion. It's about babies. It's about reproduction. And we have this real strong worship and adoration of reproduction and of family. Now, I have to say, as an atheist also, I don't really have like some crazy fixation on concepts of family. I mean, I think that for me personally, as a queer person, I don't really get these ethics. I don't really get them. Like, to me, ethics is your family is just whoever you're with. Children is something that happens if that's what you want, but it's not like the center of existence. It's not the center of identity. But in this story, this is very important. It's like, it was really important to Abraham that he have a child. And it was important to Sarah that she produce a child. I mean, Sarah felt so strongly about having a child that she let, like, one of her, of course, now we don't know what the relationship was of the women in the story. I like to think maybe Sarah and Hagar were lovers. That's just how I like to think of it. But whatever it is, Sarah actually gives Hagar, who's basically her servant, she's like her slave, honestly, her handmaid, whatever, to Abraham, and like, oh, sleep with her, and if you and her have a baby, then that'll be yours in my place. That's kind of what she was thinking. So that was in the last story. It's a bad story. This is all bad. This is actually a really bad story. Okay, so let's keep on going. We're actually getting somewhere. We've gone through 9 verses. This is an Atheist Torah Study record. I don't think that we'll get to part 3 today, but we're at least going to get through this part of chapter 18. So, yeah, we talked about the magic of telling the future. The God comes down dressed as, I guess, just dressed as a person. The God. This is basically like the angel is basically a placeholder for God, and it's like the angel's coming down, predicting the future. God's predicting the future, and telling Sarah something impossible is going to happen. So it's a miracle, quote unquote miracle. So, and it has to do with reproduction. So, the real miracle is the reproduction, regardless of what age it is. That's the real miracle. Because that's really interesting that people can do that. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah had stopped knowing the ways of a woman. I already read that. And Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "Now that I've lost the ability, am I to have enjoyment with my husband so old?" So there's a bunch of stuff going on here, but it's like, so earlier in the Parsha, there was heat. And the heat, that was really interesting that there's heat. It's one of the only times I think I ever remember a part of the Torah talking about the weather or what it felt like to be outside. Like, I don't ever remember the Torah talking about being cold, but here it's talking about being hot. And so further on down here in verse 12, which we just read, there's laughter. So the character's laughing. So, that's not bad. It's like, she's laughing. It's not like, cutting edge literature, but it is pretty interesting that in an ancient text it bothers to mention that a woman's laughing. And there's so much more going on here than just the fact that she's laughing. It's about, what does laughter mean, what is laughter? Laughter it's subversive, it's revolutionary, it's confrontational, it's self-soothing, it's irrational, it's uncontrollable. Laughter is a lot of things, and it's a good thing. It's a nice feeling. And there's also something really powerful about women's laughter too. So that's part of it too, it's not just laughter, but this is women's laughter. And somehow this text has really remarkably preserved the experience of a woman's laughter. It's really preserved well in here. It's like an archaeological relic in a cave. You open up the cave and you walk inside and there's Sarah's laughter. It's kind of nice. I don't know. Anyways, maybe it doesn't mean anything. Then Yud He Vav He, the divine, which is, like I said, here they didn't even bother. They just, instead of calling him an angel or a traveler or something, they just, the author just comes right out and says it. The author says that it's Yud He Vav He, which is, the name of God. And it says, instead of the angel, it says to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I in truth bear a child as old as I am?'" So, you've got to wonder about this God. You really do. You got to wonder about this God. So it says that there's this God. And so first of all, he's asking a question. That means that this God has got mashed potato for brains. I have to be honest. This God in this particular part of this story is just really dumb. He's created the entire universe. He's made all these people. He can basically destroy the whole world whenever he wants, and he does it all the time. He breaks everybody up from the Tower of Babel. He appears to Moses as a burning bush. But he can't figure out why Sarah's laughing. That actually says a lot. I never thought about that before. The patriarchal deity can't connect. He can't understand a woman's laughter. Boy, that is something. So the patriarchal deity can't understand a woman's laughter because there's something about it that the patriarchal deity can't control. The patriarchal deity can't control the woman's laughter. And so he doesn't understand it. And so he has to ask a human, one of his creation, according to the story, of course, not according to any possible reality, but according to the story, this patriarchal deity has to go and talk to one of his own creations to understand why a woman would be laughing. What does that tell you about the patriarchal deity and the patriarchal deity's agenda and what he stands for? What does that tell you? I think it's really interesting. Anyways, so the patriarchal deity says to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I in truth bear a child, old as I am?'" And then, so the next line, this is kind of interesting. So the next line is like, "Is anything too wondrous for Yud He Vav He, for Hashem? I will return to you at the same time next season, and Sarah shall have a son." We're still in quotes. So this is a really crazy God. This is a really, really crazy, just strange God when you really think about it. Okay, so there's this God, this patriarchal God, and the God is not always patriarchal. Sometimes the God is matriarchal. Sometimes the God is, something beyond patriarchy or matriarchy. But here the God is definitely a patriarchal God. He cannot figure out why Sarah's laughing. And then, after he can't figure that out, he goes like full off the deep end. And he's talking about himself in the third person. So, God himself, in the embodiment of an angel, is saying, "Is there anything too wondrous for God?" And then he says, "I will return to you at the same time next year, and Sarah shall have a son." So first he says, "Is there anything too wondrous for me?" Because he's God. But he's talking about himself in the third person. So he says, "Is there anything too wondrous for God?" So this is supposed to be an angel, but the angel's really God. So it gets very confusing. It's like God asking a question about God's self. God says to God's self, "Is anything too wondrous for God? Myself." And then he says, "I will return to you at the same season next year, and Sarah shall have a son." So then he's just back to predicting the future. So anyways, that's where that is. Sarah, and then here's the big moral thing. Of course, the patriarchal writer of this text just has to get this in, just as a dig. He's just got to get this dig in. Like, his God can't understand why Sarah laughs. So he's already obtuse. And then on top of that, he has this weird thing of talking to himself in the third person and saying, "God, God, say, is anything too wondrous for God? Myself, God." It's like this. This is what he's saying. And then, this is the very last part, and this is the real clincher. For this is like 5 tests of, is this patriarchy or not? So here's like number 5. This gets you, into the end zone. Sarah lied, saying, "I did not laugh, for she was frightened." Came the reply from God, "You did laugh." The angel set out from there and looked down towards Sodom, Abraham walking with them to see them off. So, what is the patriarchal deity doing? The patriarchal deity is, well, first, the author of the text says that Sarah lied. She didn't lie. She was just nervous. She was nervous and incredulous, as anyone should be. I mean, I've met lots of people like this in my life. You probably have too. They come up and they tell you something that you just know is crazy. It's not true. And yet, they totally believe it. And it's like, there's nothing you can do. So, God and God's self comes to Sarah and says she's going to have a baby. And then Sarah doesn't believe it. So Sarah is actually a good skeptic. She's on her way to becoming a good atheist, if she wanted to. I don't think Sarah's an atheist, but she's on her way. I think by the end of her life, which we'll get to next week, she's definitely almost there. Definitely almost there in the world of atheism, especially after Abraham decides to follow this random voice in his head that's telling him to kill his own son. So here Sarah is, she's not lying, she's just nervous. And she obviously doesn't believe the visitor who's God. I think she knows it's God, whatever God is. She knows that that's what it is. But she still doesn't believe it because she knows her body and she believes in her body. And this is one of the places where atheism and religion split. So what religion is telling you here is religion, Judaism, Christianity, they're kind of intertwined with each other, but this is just Jewish. So Judaism, what Judaism is telling you here is Sarah needs to believe in God rather than her own body. That's like kind of the way the old text goes. Although the text also, if you look at Jewish tradition more generally, it does tell you to respect your body. But here, the story is telling Sarah that she's not supposed to listen to her body or respect her body. She's just supposed to listen to some random patriarchal god deity who just shows up and tells her that she's going to have a baby. It's kind of... Anyways, well, I got through more than I usually do, so I'm really happy. We're at 56 minutes in, so I'm going to wind up now. But I just, I wanted to thank you. Again, this is what I always say. I don't expect anybody to listen to this. I'm just doing it for my own edification. I mean, I really enjoy studying Torah, but I'm an atheist, so this isn't really my thing. But, if you happen to watch this all the way through, well, thank you so much for watching. And thanks for sharing this hour of studying the Torah with me. I hope you'll go out and read the rest of the Parsha. It's a really good Parsha. It's like Sarah, she has a baby, and later on we get to the Akedah, which is like one of the craziest parts of Torah. I'm sorry we're not doing it this year because this would be really great for Atheist Torah Study, but we're not going to get to it. So anyways, that's about it. My name is Emma, and I really want to thank you for spending an hour studying Torah with me. If you want to, get more resources, I would definitely recommend checking out Sefaria, SEFARIA.org. If you're looking for atheist resources, I think I would recommend looking online for the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I think that's a really good place to start. Or Atheist Alliance. Those are both really good. Anyway, so thanks again for spending an hour of studying Torah with me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much. Take care. Oh, yeah, no, a couple of other things. Sorry. Nobody sent me any messages yet, and I don't think they will. But if you do want to send me a message, if you happen to be watching this, you can find me online at Atheist Torah Study at gmail.com. You can also find me Atheist Torah Study on TikTok and on YouTube. All right, thanks. Take care.